Hi, shalom to everyone from Israel. It's great to see you, some friends that I know, and some people. The corona made the Bavli-Yerushalmi connection much more impressive than in the past, so it's something good about the corona. My name is Biti. Years ago, I was teaching at YCT. I spent 4 years in America teaching there at SAR High School, at Stern College, Drisha, and YCT, which was a very amazing experience for me as a Sabra. Today I'm teaching in a second degree of Shalom Institute in Yerushalayim, and also I'm a scholar in Hartman Institute and teaches around. Today we are going to spend some time about the ritual of the shofar in the mystical tradition. And we're gonna do a masa, we're gonna do a trip about the shofar. Actually, since the Bible, מהתנ"ך לפלמ"ח, as we say it in Hebrew, trying to see the meaning of the shofar in the Torah, moving a little bit to Talmud, spending some time in understanding it in Kabbalat Tzfat, in the Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria, that inspires me a lot when I saw what he wrote about the shofar, and then moving to Hasidic tradition to see what's the ritual of the shofar and what's the meaning of the ritual of the shofar. I have to say that teaching Luria Kabbalah, a piece, is not something simple because he has its own language and concept, but we'll try to do it together. But I invite you to ask the questions and to be involved. Of course, you can share the chat. Eva, are you following this meeting?
Yes, I'll be here the whole time.
And just tell me, please, till when I'm talking, and just remind me, please.
Sure.
Is this 50 minutes? I just want to know the time schedule. Is this 50 minutes?
It ends at 1 o'clock Eastern time, so 55 minutes. And if you'd like, I'll give you a warning before.
Yeah, let me know, like,
answer some questions.
We can have a discussion about what I'm teaching, and that's fine. Thank you so much. So let's just start. And I want to say that the duty of the day of Rosh Hashanah is, of course, blowing the shofar. It says in the Torah, in Bamidbar 29, Yom Teruah Yeh Lachem. This is actually the only
interrupt.
Of the day.
Dr. Ro'i, you're not sharing your screen if you'd like everyone to see your source sheet.
No, I didn't share yet. Okay. In a minute I will. Thank you. So I'm just giving a very brief introduction about in the Bible and as a whole, the duty of the day of Rosh Hashanah is blowing the shofar. There's no other duty. We're not forbidden to do things, or we have to do. This is the duty of the day. Yom Teruah Yeh Lachem. And the sages are asking, what is Teruah? What's actually the voice of Teruah? What's the meaning of the Teruah? There's no explanation why this day of Teruah should be in Rosh Hashanah. I'm speaking about the Bible now. It just said that you should blow the shofar. The Kabbalists are very interested in...
Dr. Ro'i, one more quick thing. You are being captioned by closed captioning. So if you could slow down just a touch so they can keep up with you. Thank you.
What's the problem? I didn't understand. What's the problem? Sorry.
There's closed captioning.
What is closed captioning?
Someone is transcribing you for those who...
Oh, I see. Okay.
So if you could slow down.
Okay, in a minute we'll see the text, so it will be much easier. I just want to say that, again, the duty of the day of the Rosh Hashanah is blowing the shofar. It's the one and the only duty, biblical speaking, of this day. No explanation why we should blow the shofar in that day. What's the meaning of blowing the shofar? It gives us the law of blowing the shofar and not more. For the Kabbalists, and of course for other people, we want to actually to explain what are we doing, and we want to give a meaning to our performance, to our actions. So here we come, and now I will share the screen with you, and this is the text that I want to share with you. Let me 1 minute move it here. So here we are. We start with actually Rav Saadia Gaon, 11th century, 10th century in the Middle Ages, and Rav Saadia Gaon gives us about, you can see here, about 10 different meaning of blowing the shofar. 10 different meaning because he does not know what's the meaning of blowing the shofar. It's not expressed explicitly in the Bible. And we can see here we have a few meaning of why blowing the shofar. We are crowning the king. We are declaring that everyone can make the tshuva. We want to remind the Har Sinai, the revelation at Sinai. We wanted to remind the prophets saying, so it's like a shofar. They are the God's words in the world. We want to remember the Holy Temple, that people were blowing the shofar there. We want to remind Akedat Yitzchak, binding of Isaac. We want us to be afraid from God. We want us to remind us that there is a promise that all the people of Israel will gather together. We want to remind us the resurrection. You see, 10 different meaning, very different meaning of blowing the shofar, saying to us there's no one meaning why we are blowing the shofar. Maimonides, after Rav Saadia Gaon, in Ilchot Tshuva, I really recommend you to read this piece. It's really magnificent, very interesting. Ilchot Tshuva is 5 chapters. In the middle, you have this fundamental chapter about free will. Maimonides is very organized, rationalist, working very, very organized in his writing, saying to us what's the meaning of the shofar. And Maimonides actually is concentrating in saying, even though blowing the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, it's the law, this is what we are commanded to do. There is something to tell us about this. He's completely aware that the Torah has no meaning of blowing the shofar. And he says, this is what we should do. We are obeying the commandment in the Bible. Nevertheless, we have a hint. Yesh lanu remez. What is the remez? U yeshanim mishnatchem. Wake up. Wake up. You are that sleeping, the one who is under a dormant. Open up yourself. Arise yourself. Open and awake and make a tshuva. Remember the one who created you. So this is Maimonides, very well-known words about the meaning of the shofar, to wake up, to give us a call of waking us up. Sefer HaChinuch, that actually follows Maimonides, explain, Lefi she'adam ba'al chomer, we are made out of body, flesh and blood. And if we are made of flesh and blood, we won't wake ourselves, but by something that wakes us up. And this one, like somebody who's waking himself up for a war. So Sefer HaChinuch actually follows Maimonides. Again, the meaning of blowing the shofar is to give us a call, to tell us one day in a year you have to wake up. As it says in Masechet Chagiga, people are living in this world and actually they are sleeping. And we are here, but we are not aware of what's going on around. And Rosh Hashanah is the day to wake us up, to be aware of what are we doing. So this is still here. We said, Rav Saadia Gaon, we spoke about Maimonides, we spoke about Sefer HaChinuch, and I want to move on now to the Kabbalist and to see what's their understanding of blowing the shofar. And I know that most of you didn't study hundreds of hours of Kabbalah, so I'll try to do it in a very, very simple and short way. But for the Kabbalist, the divine world has lots of potentials, lots of characteristic. We can see here we have Keter. Yes, we have the crown, we have wisdom, we have Binah, we have Chesed, grace, we have judgment, we have beauty, Hod, Tiferet, we have Netzach, we have all kinds of potentials. Actually, the Kabbalists are numbering it of 10 different potentials, just to tell us, listen, the idea of monotheism is very nice, but actually this monotheism is a polytheistic monotheism, meaning we have many, many kinds of kochot, of strength, of powers of God. There is a feminine God as well as the masculine one. Why should we think about God as masculine? Because this is the Hebrew grammar of talking about Elohim in the Bible? No, of course he has also feminine sides into it, and we'll see it in a minute. The structure of these 10 potentials, which I offer you this, as the Kabbalists offer us, this kind of thinking about God, not as something that is transcendent to the world, or something that is simple, like one in its simpleness. They offer us a structure that encompasses a lot of entities and potentials of God. And actually, we can describe it as a development from the Midrash, from the sages, that speaks about Midat Hadin uMidat HaRachamim. I would say that this is the base structure that the Kabbalists are developing later on. God has two potentials, Midat Hadin uMidat HaRachamim. We know that Midat Hadin actually stands for the name Elohim, and Midat HaRachamim stands for the name Yud Kei Vav Kei. We know it in the Midrash already in the beginning of Genesis. So there's two potentials, Din and Rachamim. And there's also feminine and masculine. And there's also, for the Kabbalist, much more complexity in this structure that actually brings us to speak about this Bina. Do you see my arrow? Yeah, the Bina here in the left side is a feminine potency of God, and she's actually giving birth, and she is the place of the tshuva, and she is giving birth to all the rest of these potentials. And today we will speak a little bit about the Bina. It's also my name, my original name. But Bina is a feminine potency of God. Bina, she's giving birth, and in a minute we'll see her very, very crucial role in blowing the shofar according to the Ari. I want to go further. And now, as we say in Hebrew, tzarich להפשיל שרוולים. We need to go inside the idea of Reb Chaim Vital, the first and the most important disciple of Ari Luria in the 16th century. As you know, Tzfat actually was a very, very short time episode in the life of the Jewish people, in the I would say that the Masa of the Jewish mystical tradition, where the Ari came to Tzfat and lived there just for 2 years, and even less than 2 years, died in a plague actually after his coming, after less than 2 years after his coming, in the age of 38. This is the Ari, Rabbi, in Hebrew we say Rabbi Ha'elohi Yitzchak Luria. Yes, and in English you say Luria. So his foremost important disciple is Reb Chaim Vital, writing his master's thought and keeping it to himself, Nevertheless, a few years later, somebody is actually cheating him, taking the corpus of what the Ari gave him and actually printing it outside for what was meant to be for a close group of people, became now one of the main corpuses in the Jewish tradition that influenced North Africa, Eastern Europe, Israel, Italy, in what we can describe as expulsion of Kabbalah after the 16th century. So we are speaking about a text that was very, very fundamental to many, many people, that shaped their understanding of blowing the shofar. The idea of this book, Sha'ar HaKavanot, as you see here, the title Sha'ar HaKavanot, is to say, we are performing the mitzvah. Performing the mitzvah is not something that you do just obeying God. This is the plain meaning of that. But there is a very deep meaning to what we are doing. And Luria is giving us a very, very complicated meaning of every detail of the mitzvah. Just for comparison, if Maimonides is saying to us, it's not important if we're sacrificing 6 sheep or 7 sheep. It's just a way of just deciding the number of the sheep. For the Kabbalist, every detail is very important. And what's Rabbi Chaim Vital, the disciple of the Ari, wants to tell us that every detail in a mitzvah has its meaning. It's a complex meaning. What I found in it is a very, very profound psychological understanding of the divine world as also the human world. Very, very profound, I would say, insights about the human condition and the divine condition, which actually comes together. Reb Chaim Vital, for example, is saying, somebody is waking up in the morning, he's putting on a tefillin. What does it mean? Oh, so let me explain you. It means a mochin. He calls it mochin. Mochin, I will translate it as brains. These cubes that sits on the forehead, actually, it's a kind of extension of your brain, which can be described as expanding your consciousness. So you are waking up in the morning, a Jew is waking up in the morning, he's putting on his tefillin, and he wants to know what's the meaning of that. And Reb Chaim Vital in the Ari gives him now a meaning. You can expand your horizons, you expand your consciousness in putting on a tefillin. So this is Sha'ar HaKavanot. I want to say it because many people, when they speak about the Ari or the Kabbalah, they speak about the theology. Let's say the Tzimtzum became such an important idea. You know, people are taking this idea of Tzimtzum, outside of the Jewish tradition. Oh, Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. They take all kinds of conceptual ideas from the Luria. But actually what I want to say, that people were more interested in the kavanot. They were more interested about giving meaning to what they are doing than giving a theology, in an abstract theology, how the world was created, what happened with the divine coming to the world, and etc. So Sha'ar HaKavanot was the main composition, the first composition that was published, and it tells us a lot about weight, where to put the balance in what were people looking when they were reading Kabbalah. They were reading Kabbalah because they wanted to enrich the ritual and the practical way of life. I want to say that because I think that the Kabbalah went a little bit out of balance. This is basically what was published first, and I think it tells us a lot about Jews and Judaism. It's about practice and about giving meaning to practice. What else I want to say? All this is a little bit of introduction before we go to maybe one of the most complicated texts you ever read in your Jewish life. So I want to have it, I want us to go into it in a softened way. So I said something about the kavanot, about trying to get a meaning to what we're saying. I want to say something else. For the Ari is describing us the divine world, as we saw before, with this 10 Sefirot, and he takes the 10 Sefirot and he creates a collection of what he calls 5 faces. 5 faces. Out of these 10 Sefirot, 5 faces. The first one is here, and he calls him Ari Hanpin, the merciful God. This God is like a grandfather. He's fully of merciful. He described as Daniel described the king sitting with a white beard, full of merciful. The second one, the second partzuf and the third partzuf is Chokhmah and Binah. Chokhmah and Binah, wisdom and understanding, are described no less than Ima and Abba. Unbelievable. This is before Freud. Ari tells us that these 2 figures, Ima and Abba, are very meaningful in our life. And in the divine world, we call these 2 entities Ima and Abba. Ima and Abba. So we have three faces that we spoke till now. Ari Hanpin, the merciful grandfather, Ima and Abba, and you can now get the idea that we're speaking here about a kind of a family. So the divine world actually resonant, a most important sphere in our life, which is the family sphere, the 3 generation, Keter, Chokhmah, Binah, the grandfather, father, and mother, and we still needs to describe the 2 last one of the 5 partzufim that the Ari wants to focus on from the Old 10 Sefirot. So the third one is Tiferet, this one that actually encompasses all this together. Tiferet describes as the God of judgment. As opposed to a merciful grandfather, this described as a very young, if you know Shira Kavod in Shabbat, Kvutzotav Taltalim Shchachorot, he's a black hair, young guy, very eager to do things, lots of rage he has. This is the God that we know mostly from the Bible. And this is, we call it Ze'er Anpin, the one with the short face, which this one is the one with the long face, merciful face. This one is with rage, with a short face. Do you see my error? I see it, but do you see it? Can you nod in your head?
Yes, we do.
Yes, you see. Okay. It's very abstract, so I want you to be a little bit focused. It's hard. I'm giving you like, you know, a capsula of Loriani Kabbalah in 2, 3, 5 minutes. Okay, so out of this 10, we spoke about the grandfather, Abba and Ima, unbelievable, and the boy, which is this God. I just want to mention you that the Kabbalah sits on the Midrash. For my understanding, Kabbalah is a late Midrash, not less than a late Midrash. Don't think about something, it's a late Midrash. And if we read in the Midrash, we see that God describes twice, and it says, Hitgala lahem al hayam, or Hitgala lahem b'ma'amad har Sinai. God has 2 faces also in the Midrash, as a young person or as an old person. It says in the Midrash. So the Kabbalah develops basic ideas that we find in the Midrash. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th one is this one, which is also a feminine, and her name is Shechina, and her name is Malchut. And she is actually the daughter. If he is the boy, she is the daughter. And interestingly to say that this one, a brother and a sister, but also they are a pair of Chatan and Kala, HaKadosh Baruch Hu ve'Ashchina, which we know in the Kabbalistical and Hasidic phrase, L'shem yichud kudsha brichu shchinte. We want to unify. So I'm summarizing what I said. I said that the Kabbalah in the Middle Ages, especially Sefer HaZohar, some describe Sefer HaZohar as the third in its importance in the Jewish bookshelf. We have the Bible, we have the Talmud, and some say that the Zohar was the most influential composition ever in the Jewish tradition. Nevertheless, we take the idea of 10 Sefirot, and the Ari in the 16th century described from this 10 Sefirot 5 faces. He calls it Chamisha Partzufim. Atika, Ze'er Anpin, Nukba, yes, the boy and the girl, and Abba and Ima. If you're with me here, I mean, this is like interesting ideas blowing my mind when I first saw it, to think like this about God, because this is something that is very important. Personally for me, to say that the divine world is not simple, mathematically proof, like a kind of something that you say God exists and he's there, but rather to explain and to describe the divine in a very complicated ideas that actually I find very interesting. So till here, I finished my introduction to the Luriani Kabbalah, and we can move forward. Are we okay? Are we okay with this? Okay. So I'm moving on.
I want to let you know we're about halfway through the time.
Okay. So let's read Rabbi Chaim Vital, and I will read and I will explain during reading to make it more accessible. Rabbi Chaim Vital is saying, now we will explain the shofar intentions. What actually happening in the shofar intentions? And he gives us 5 different questions that also can tell us what's going on here. And this is the questions. Mihu HaShofar? Who is the shofar? Who is the tokea? Who is the one who blows the shofar? Who is the mouth of the tokea that you blow the shofar? And what is the voice that's going out of the shofar? These 5 very strange questions are actually bringing us to acknowledge that these questions are giving us, taking us to a different framework, to a different space. What do you mean, who is the shofar? The shofar is shofar. What do you mean, who is blowing the shofar? Moshe Zuchmir is blowing the shofar. What is the peh of the tokeh? What's the mouth of the tokeh? What do you mean? Moshe Zuchmir's mouth is the mouth, the tokeh of a shofar. Ari wants to give us the idea of a different sphere of the divine world. He wants to tell us that what we see is not just what we see, that we see the external performance of this ritual. Somebody from the synagogue is taking the shofar and blowing it. But actually, the insight, the real reality that's happening here is a different one, is a divine one. And what he wants to tell us is that we are in front of an event of giving birth to the human, the Adam and Chava. Because inside the shofar, he sees the space of inside the shofar as a womb, that in this day, we are actually giving birth to the human being, which is both the divine and the human being as a whole. Why is he saying that? According to the tradition, this day is not the day that the world was created, because actually the world was created in the 25th of Elul. The 25th of Elul was the world creation. That was the date. Rosh Hashanah is the day of creation of the human being, creation of Adam. And as we know, Adam was born with Eve. together with Eve. What actually we are doing in Rosh Hashanah is we not focusing on crowning God, on remembering revelation at Sinai, binding of Isaac, all the meaning that we saw Rav Seadia Gaon is telling us. All these are not so interested and are not so interesting for the Ari. He is interested in the big picture of the day. The big picture of this day, of Rosh Hashanah, is the creation of man, the creation of humankind. This is the picture that he wants us to have in mind in this Rosh Hashanah. So when we say in the Tefillah, Hayom Harat Olam, yes, today the world was conceived, it's not accurate. We need to say, Hayom Harat Adam, today is the day of the conceiving of a human being. I'm reading it to you, this idea, in just a, very short way, saying, Omnam Sod Shofar, the secret of the Shofar, I heard one from my master, which is the Ari, because Rab Chaim Vital is writing this. And he said, the Shofar milishon shoferet, it's like a tube, shoferet shel beitza, it says in the Mishma, a shoferet shel kaneh, that שהוא חלול מתוכו, that he is vaccinated, you say, absent from within. Yes? And inside, who is blowing the shofar? Look at this idea. I mean, it's psychoanalytic speaking, it's like amazing. So the one who blows the shofar is the Ima. Because the shofar is actually a womb. And in this day, she is creating inside herself the human being, Ze'er Anpin Venukbe, the boy and the girl, what we saw. And she's blowing them throughout her mouth, inside. And they are going inside the pnimiut, inside the inner place of the shofar, which there is lighting that is encompassing everything inside the halal, inside the space there. And this is the sod of the shofar. And then they go out from the petachton to lachutz. Actually, what describes here is giving birth, conceiving and giving birth in the day that the shofar is a womb. And this is what he says, Kol HaShofar. And what he wants to say is that in this day, Chava and Adam was created. And we too, this is not an historical event that happened at the past creation of the humankind, but rather it happenings every year. Every year in Rosh Hashanah, we are creating and acting and reacting the birth of us, the birth of ourselves. The idea of Rosh Hashanah is the idea to be able to reborn and to be new in life, and to start the year with the idea that you start from scratch, that today you have born, and that every year we can recreate ourselves. This is the main idea of the tshuva. This is the main idea of Rosh Hashanah. This is the main idea that works against depression, against people who don't believe that they can start from the beginning, that they don't believe that tomorrow, as Scarlett O'Hara is saying, Nahon, tomorrow is another day, because they cannot imagine this unbelievable idea of the tshuva, that something that done can be erased, and then we can start again. This is the idea that Jonah, when we read in Yom Kippur, doesn't understand. And he stays, if I may remind you, a chapter before the end, he stays outside of Nineveh, wanting to explain God that he's wrong, and the people of Nineveh even though they made the tshuva, they didn't really change. So Yonah is not understanding the concept of tshuva. But the Ari want us to reconnect to this idea and to actually perform it in every time we hear the shofar, not the binding of Isaac, not creating of the world, not crowning God. He wants us to be concentrated in the idea that this day we have been new to the world and we can start from the beginning. And then he adds another thing. Why not to add? Because it's the Ari, and the Ari can add more and more ideas because it's all around. Mina metzar karatiya, this the pasuk, Mina metzar karatiya, saying that the shofar is short in the top and wide from beneath, because this is the idea of min hametzar, from strings. I called you God. מקום המצר הוא מקום הקצר הנתון בפיו של התוקע, in the mouth of the תוקע, and הרחב is למטה. So the idea of the shofar is also giving us hope to know that from the strengths or from constraints we can be out and we can be redeemed. But this is a second idea that the Ari gives us, you know, as we say in Hebrew, as a bakshish, something else. But the main idea is to say it's the day that we are created. And I'm just skipping this now to Hasidut. And I want again to say, this is the picture that the Luria wants us to think in Rosh Hashanah, the idea that we can create ourselves, the idea that we are actually acting out, we're reacting the idea of human being, Adam and Eve, created in this day. Okay. I'm moving now from the 16th century to the 18th century. I'm jumping 200 years, and I'm jumping from Tzfat to Eastern Europe to Reb Dov Ber Mimezerich, the architect of Hasidism movement, the most important disciple of the Baal Shem Tov. Interestingly enough, as Reb Chaim Vital is the disciple and the disciple and the writer of Luria, of the Ari in Tzfat, Reb Dov Ber Mimezerich is a disciple and the writer, the Shofar, of Baal Shem Tov. Both of them, the Ari in the 16th century in Tzfat and Baal Shem Tov in the 18th century, yes, in Mezhibush, let's say, didn't write. They were oral teachers. They spoke, they went around, they had a group of people, but never wrote. We can say a few, maybe Baal Shem Tov wrote one letter, maybe the Ari wrote something, but as a whole, their Torah was written by others. They had to have Sofer to write their ideas. So here we find Reb Dov Ber Mimezerich in the Megid Varav Yaakov, that we say in Hebrew, there's expression, the shofar of the Hasidut, the writer, the one who gives voice to the Hasidut. This is what we say in Hebrew, a shofar shel Hasidut. So I must use this expression in this class. Reb Dov Ber Mimezerich is writing us his idea about blowing the shofar. And we'll read these two. I don't think we'll have more time, but let's see. We'll read Reb Dov Ber Mimezerich, the writer of the Baal Shem Tov, and we'll read another tradition of Rabbi Ephraim Misadlikov. He was the neched, the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. He's very important because he grew up in the house of his grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov. And what he says about the Baal Shem Tov must be true. You know, as scholars, we don't believe to every writer in Hasidut that want to make his master so great, magnificent, unbelievable, magician, whatever. But we are trying to be very critical about the traditions that we see. And we search for very reliable traditions. So both Reb Dov Ber Mimezerich and Rabbi Ephraim Misadlikov are very reliable people to say what's the Baal Shem Tov actually wanted us to think. So let's see. We'll see very different interpretation to the Baal Shem Tov from these both people. One, Reb Dov Ber Mimezevich. Let's read it together. Yachshov, he will think, meaning when you hear the shofar, as the Ari told us to think about the idea that this day אנחנו נבראים מחדש. We rebuilt, we reborn in this world. Reb Dov Ber Mezerich has a different idea. יחשוב שעולם הדיבור מדבר בו. When you hear the shofar, think that the world of speech, the world of word, is speaking unto you, which means God is speaking into you. וזולתו אי אפשר לדבר. And if this world of speech wouldn't be, you won't be able to talk at all. כמו שכתוב, אדוני שפתי תפתח. The beginning of the tefillah, we say, אדוני שפתי תפתח. Reb Dov Mezerich learns it in a very radical way. We can't open our lips if Adonai wouldn't open our lips. So actually, our ability to speak, to express ourselves, our vitality, our will that we express in tefillah has a source. The source is divine, is the Olam Hadibur, the world of speech, which is God. וגם כן מחשבתו, אי אפשר להיות כל אחד על ידי עולם המחשבה. Even not just his talking, not just his words, oral words, vowels, but also his thinking, also his ideas are coming from the divine. והוא כשופר. This is the idea of Reb Dov Ber Mezerich. You have to understand, when you hear the blowing of the shofar, again, don't think like Rav Seadia Gaon told you to think about the binding of the Isaac, the king, now the king is coming again. No, you think about yourself as the shofar. You identified yourself with the object itself of the shofar. You are a tunnel in this world. You are a tool. You are a place, a vessel for a divine vitality that blows into you. And you, like the shofar, you are opening yourself up for the divine, and you are channeled to transfer the divine into the world. והוא כשופר, think about yourself as a shofar. כי מה שתוקעים בתוכו, אותו הכל הוא מוציא. What he blows into the shofar, this is the voice that goes out. Very interesting, because the shofar is a tool, is an instrument, if I may say, that the voice is very simple and plain and clean. You don't know exactly what kind of voice will go out when the shofar is blowed, if you can say it in English. But the wind, the breath that you put into the shofar, the voice that you put in a shofar, is a kind of a hevel, the vitality of yourself, which is actually the divine. ואם יפרוש ממנו התוקע, לא יצא הכל. If the תוקע, which is God, won't blow the shofar, which is us, no voice will come out. כך בהיעדר חס ושלום יתברך ממנו, the absence of God, חס ושלום, חס וחלילה, he cannot speak or think. So this is a kind of a mystical tradition of Dov Ber Mezerich. Putting yourself in a place that you are a vessel to the God, that you're actually staying in this world in anava, in a kind of ego, that you suppress your ego in order to be able to be a tunnel for the divine in the world. This is a kind of a mission for this mystic way of thinking. And we see it in the shofar. I mean, in Reb Dov Ber Mezerich, we see it constantly in his Torot. But when it comes to the shofar, it's very clear that this mystic want us to have this kind of work, that we are empty. Our ego is going very, very low, and we are putting ourselves as a vessel to the divine. Very interesting. Vehu shofar. This is the idea. When you hear the shofar, think about yourself as the shofar. Think about inhaling yourself, or vacuumated yourself. Yeah, make yourself nothing in order to get something from above. This is what you need to do when you're davening, when you're studying Torah, when you're speaking with somebody else. This is your mission, to be as a Tana. And the shofar actually is an object that emphasizes this idea. Let's read, in this, I think we won't have time to do more than this. Rabbi Ephraim Isadlikov, as I said, the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, he tells us a dream that he dreamt. And it's very interesting that the Hasidic tradition is very, makes a big deal from dreams. It's not something, it says in the Tanakh, Chalomot shav yedaberu. Yeah, in a question mark or without a question mark, the sages are saying, but he's taking very serious the dreams. And look what he's dreaming. He's dreaming that the Baal Shem Tov is going up in Bet HaKnesset and takes a shofar and taka. Yes, he's doing the tkiot, tashra, tasha, tarat, all these tkiot that we do in Rosh Hashanah. And he himself is saying, tkiya. And this is what he is doing when he's blowing himself the shofar. And לקח השופר אצל הפה שלו, he took the shofar, attached it to his mouth, כמנהג התוקעים, as the תוקעים are doing, ונפח בו מעט, and he blew inside it. ואחר כך היה אוחז בשתי ידיו לצד גופו. So he's not actually holding the shofar, but the call, the voice of the shofar, is going out. Ve'ani, and me, the grandson, Rabbi Ephraim Isadlikov, I'm standing and I'm amazed. What should I do? מה אני אעשה? כשהוא בעצמו אומר לפני התקיעות ותוקע בעצמו. So he's describing us in the logic of the dream, very unreal, surrealistic event, that the Baal Shem Tov is the tokea and is the one who says to the tokea what to do, and actually is not holding the shofar, and somehow the voice goes out. But I'm more interested in now, what's happening now. ואחר כך קרה, יעמוד, the Baal Shem Tov is calling his grandson, Rabbi Ephraim Isadlikov, יעמוד, like you calling somebody to read, to lay in the Torah. And Ephraim Isadlikov tells us, ועליתי שמה. Where did he go? ועמדתי אצל רוחב השופר. I'm inside the shofar. This is what he sees. This is the vision that he sees. That he himself is not outside from the shofar, but actually, like, a tiny little, I don't know how you call it in English, all these liliputs, and nasim, they go inside very small places. Alice in the Wonderland. He's going inside the shofar. Berachti bracha, and I made a bracha, כמו שעולים לספר תורה. והייתי עומד ממש בתוך השופר. I was actually standing inside the shofar when the voice was going out of the shofar. So he's describing an amazing experience of him inside the shofar, standing there while the shofar is blown. And then he's saying, לקחתי את השופר בעצמי. I took the shofar myself, לביתי, to my house, ותקעתי בו תשרת בעצמי. Maybe his grandfather is so, such a big master, he needs also to do it from himself, to have this separation from his grandfather. I want to stop here. I want to stop here and to say that actually we see two different moves. Maggid Mezerich wants us to be the shofar, to empty, to vaccinate ourselves, and to be in such an anava state of mind that we see ourselves as a shofar. Whereas Rabbi Ephraim Isadlikov sees a different picture of us inside the shofar, inside the midst of this action. It's both of the experiences are described are very intense. This object is a very crucial component in this day for varied mystical missions and different mission. One is to release your ego and to be a tunnel for the divine to blow within you, exactly as it described human being created by God. He breathed into him, nishmat chaim. Whereas Rabbi Ephraim Isadlikov wants a different and an opposite motion, not to evacuate yourself, but to be in the midst of what's happening, to be there inside the shofar. I think it's an amazing picture of these two Hasidic rabbis. For them, the mitzvah, obeying the mitzvah, performing the mitzvah is not enough. They want to perform the mitzvah in intensity. As they say, lekayem taryag mitzvot le'en ketz. I want to be there. I want to fully be there. Not just, schlep myself to the shul and to be one of the audience, listening, half looking around. No, they want to experience their religious life in an intense way. So they can describe two very mystical and intense experiences of the object of the shofar. For sure, the Maggid Mezerich describing the inside of the shofar as a tunnel, and Rabbi Ephraim Isadlikov is expressing the inside of the shofar within which he is inside, is resonant to what the Ari describes us as the shofar as the womb of Adam and Eve in the beginning of the creation. But now they're speaking about first person. They're speaking about themselves. It's not a tradition of the Lurianic tradition about like a structure. They're speaking in their voice. We can describe the move from Kabbalah to Hasidut as the move from describing the divine world in a way to the psychology of us. Some people describe it as psycholization of Kabbalah, or as Buber described it, moving the mystic to an ethos, to something that you are performing or internalizing. Another scholar is mentioning this expression. You are internalizing the insight of the divine, of the bina, of the womb, inside yourself. Now you have to experience yourself. You have to experience within you the consciousness of the shofar, and we can see two different ways of experiencing this ritual, this object of ritual, as a space for a work within ourselves. I think here I would stop and want to ask you if you have any question, something to say about it. We didn't read everything, but if somebody wants to say something, I would be happy to hear. I mean, this is striking ideas. I must say, we cannot ignore the creativity, the intensity, the profound psychological thinking. That's why I like this, especially this kind of compositions and literature. But I want to ask you if you have something to add to it, to ask. I mean, we spoke about, Rav Saadia Gaon giving his, I would say, external reasons for blowing the shofar. We spoke about Maimonides waking us up. We spoke about Luria giving us an amazing picture of the shofar as a womb, that in this day human beings created. Aleph Tishrei, this is the day that human being created, and we have to acknowledge the idea of rebirth. And we move to Hasidic tradition, saying how you intensify the idea of the shofar in two different ways. Saying in one way, Vehu shofar, you are actually putting yourself out as a space for God, as being a tunnel or vessel to the divine in the world. And the opposite move of Rabbi Ephraim Sadlikov, wanting to be there inside the shofar, being inside there to intense the experience of blowing the shofar. So I think this is a kind of a summarizing of a few ideas about the shofar. Why to limit the shofar to Rosh Hashanah? Very nice. Yeah. Why to limit the shofar for Rosh Hashanah? I must say that both the Ari, Maggid Mezerich, and Rabbi Ephraim Sadlikov will repeat these ideas, this mystical consciousness and way of life in many, many ways. I mean, the shofar is a kind of a very, concentrated idea and object to say what they want to say, but it's their mission in life. For the Ari, rebirth yourself is actually the inner meaning of many, many rituals that we do. It's the inner meaning of the tefillah. After the tefillah, we do nefilat apayim. We actually experience death, and then we can start our day in a new way. It's the Shabbat that we start our life again. And for Maggid Mezerich to release your ego and to be open to the divine within you, and to be aware to the way you put yourself in the world and you hold yourself in the world, is going throughout almost everything that he speaks. And Rabbi Ephraim Sadlikov, to intensify the divine and the vitality, and to be close and cleaving to God, to the core of life, to the core of the breath, is also going through his Torot.
We had one other question, and then we're out of time. But
okay.
The question was: is this shofar as womb still present in Hasidic discourse, or is it no longer really spoken about?
Yes, it is. I must tell you that when I taught the Chovevei Torah many, many years ago, at the end of their smicha, and the smicha program, Rabbi Dov Linzer asked me to speak about, and I spoke about the shofar because this is the present that they wanted to give for the musmachim. And a few years later, I met with Rabbi Dov Linzer, and I said, how is it going? I was in Israel back, and he said, we are no longer giving a shofar. I said, why not? And he said, it's a phallic object. And I said, no, if you would read Kabbalah, you see it's a womb. So I think the Kabbalists are very open up in their mind to let us think about also the divine as a feminine, and also this object that becomes actually a womb and a space that actually brings us back to life and gives us vitality. Yes, of course, there's a lot of things that the Kabbalists are talking about, differences between Tki'ah and Tu'ah and Shvarim, and the silence within between. And I didn't speak about the Hasidic thinking later on, speaking about just the simple voice, like an animal, like somebody that is crying, that is beyond these ideas of being shofar yourself or being inside the shofar. So there are more ideas. I just brought a few ideas, to open up our mind before Rosh Hashanah. I want to thank everyone who participate in this meeting, and it's great to see you from here, from Israel. And I wish every one of you Shana Tova Umetuka. May we can imagine the shofar as a rebirth and as a vessel for the divine, and both as being intensified with the vitality of the divine in the world. Shana Tova to all of you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ro'i. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to take a break now, and we will return at 7 p.m. Eastern Time in these same 3 Zoom rooms. You can use the same links that we used.
Whoever wants to stay to ask me a question can, or it's just you're closing the room?
We can.
Okay, so if somebody wants to say something, Lane, I see you're smiling. Maybe you want to say something.
And everyone else will see you at 7 o'clock. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Shana Tova. Lots of briut and simcha.